Hi, I'm Mia Freedman and welcome to No Filter. How many women are in your friendship circle? 10? 20? There's a very good chance at least 2 of them are living with endometriosis, a disease that not many people know about or talk about. For me, one of those women is my extraordinary cousin, Sylvia Freedman. At the age of 21, while she was interning at Mamma Mia in fact, Syl was diagnosed with Endo. She'd never heard of it, and when she looked for information, she realised there wasn't really any. So she launched Endoactive, a community that brings together women suffering from endometriosis and gives them resources, coping mechanisms, and, most importantly, emotional support and a voice. A voice for a disease that has gone without one for far too long. Now she's 26, and since launching Endoactive 5 years ago, Syl has jumped from strength to strength, despite going through some really, really tough times.
It's going to be a quick half-hour day surgery, in, out, like you should be fine. And in reality, it was like a 4-hour surgery and I didn't leave hospital for 4 or 5 days.
It's been interesting as her cousin watching that happen. And I learnt so many lessons about endo when she was working here as an intern. And I won't say I behaved badly because all I did was sort of judge what I saw, which seemed to be that she was really being pretty slack. But in fact, behind the scenes, what was going on is that she was battling this terrible illness that she didn't even really understand. It can take people years to be diagnosed with endo. So many people have it and don't realise it because the symptoms can be so different and the levels of pain can be so different. Syl's had operations. She's frozen her eggs. She's spent a lot of time in bed, a lot of time soul searching, and a lot of time fighting for access to drugs, for the rights of other women with endo, and for awareness. So it was pretty awesome to invite her in for a conversation on No Filter. Here's Sylvia Freedman. Syl, are you nervous?
I'm a little nervous.
I've known you since you were born.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to be nervous about.
Okay.
We share a surname.
That's true.
Some people might think we're related.
And that's because we are.
That's because we are. Now, hilariously, just to keep it in the family even more, the person at Mamma Mia in charge of helping me research, because usually I get a research document before I record a No Filter interview, and the person who usually prepares it is the No Filter gun producer, Eliza. But today, because it was you, and because Liza has 100 things going on, Luca, your cousin, my son, was in charge of doing the research document. So he said, Mum, have you had a look at the Syl research document? And I opened it. I was like, oh no, I haven't got to it yet. And I opened it up and it said, Mia, she's your cousin, you should know this shit. That's all it said in the whole document.
I'm in full support of that.
Yeah, naturally I reported him to HR and he's currently under performance review.
Probation.
He's back on probation.
In the naughty corner.
Hey, I know everything about you and I know nothing. And I realised that I knew nothing when you were actually working here at Mamma Mia. You were interning and you seemed to be a little bit slack. You seemed to be taking it a little bit loosely. Sometimes you'd call in sick.
Often.
Sometimes you'd have to leave early. Sometimes you'd come late. Sometimes you'd just sort of disappear for a bit in the day.
Yep.
And I remember saying to my mum, you know, Syl, it's really kind of awkward because she's in there and we've got lots of interns and she's really just seems a bit slack. And what I realised a little bit later is that you were actually chronically and critically ill. And it was something, even though you're my beloved cousin and we're quite close, I didn't know. Tell me about that time from your point of view. How old were you and what was happening?
I think when I first started interning at Mamma Mia, I was 19 or 20. And that's when I think I was really at the peak of all my endo symptoms. But at that point, I hadn't had a diagnosis. So everything that you were seeing, I was feeling. And I was so anxious that all of my employers felt that way about me.
Because you were working, you were waitressing as well.
Yeah. I was working at a restaurant in Bondi and at Mamma Mia and at uni. And I was totally flaking out on everything in every aspect of my life. And I think so many girls with endometriosis experience that. And then you live with this like constant anxiety of, oh shit, what is that person? They must think I'm a total flake. I'm always late. I'm always leaving. And you know what people think.
So what were you experiencing? What did it feel like for you physically?
Physically, I would be so tired in the mornings. Like, I just was finding it so hard to wake up. Like, even getting to the office was a real struggle. And then as soon as I got there, if I had maybe worn like tight jeans and then I was starting to get pain, my belly would start to bloat so much that I would have to like undo my button and zipper sitting at my desk. I would just, all the pain would start. And if I had eaten possibly the wrong thing for breakfast, I didn't really understand the link between endometriosis and food intolerances at that time. I would often go around to the cafe around the corner and get a Bircher muesli. I would come straight back to the office and I'd be throwing up within seconds. And then, just throughout the day, I would find it so hard to express to people what I was feeling because I didn't really understand myself.
Does it feel like period pain?
It was like extremely bad period pain, but then also with some like really bad nausea and extreme fatigue as well.
And not just like I'm a teenager, out a lot of nights during the week kind of fatigue.
No, like just heavy fatigue. And just real brain fog as well. Like sometimes I felt like I couldn't really concentrate on what I was doing. And because I just felt like there was cotton wool in my head.
So how were you diagnosed? When was the first time you heard the word endometriosis?
The first time I heard the word endometriosis, it was while I was still interning at Mamma Mia. And in amongst all these different symptoms that I was experiencing, I didn't understand that they were all linked. Endometriosis can affect the immune system, compromise the immune system quite dramatically. And so you might be having all period pain like during your period or extreme period pain without having a period, and then the fatigue and the nausea and the food intolerances and stuff. But also I was getting like chronic UTIs. That's another reason why I sometimes had to leave so quickly because
I get UTIs. They're the worst.
1 second I would be fine. 2 seconds later I'd feel this slight twinge, and then next second peeing blood, need to go straight to emergency and get right on antibiotics before it turns into like an infection, bladder infection.
So did you just think you were kind of in the wars and having a bit of a run of bad luck?
Yeah, I just felt like I was honestly started to question myself a lot. I was like, maybe I'm just a total hypochondriac and I'm just like manifesting all these physical ailments in myself all the time, because how can someone be going to specialists and doctors so often every week with something different happening all the time?
And each time they'd just treat that one thing and not look at you holistically. Is that right?
Like if I got a cold, I'd have it for 3 weeks and work 10 times worse than anyone else. Or I get a sinus infection where I just like couldn't breathe, couldn't sleep, And
you wouldn't relate that to endometriosis?
No. Or like if like a stomach bug, I would be horrendously ill for so long and just couldn't get rid of it.
So who put the pieces together for you finally?
Well, so I was getting all these chronic UTIs and of course all the other pain and stuff, but again, like didn't really piece this all together as one big picture. And then I was telling my mum one day, that having a bit of a joke, that I was having some light bladder leakage sometimes when I was I was like,
welcome to my world, but you were only 19.
But I was only 19. She was like, it's really not normal to like leak when you're laughing at your age. That's not really cool, and getting all these UTIs all the time. And maybe I should take you to a urogynecologist who I once saw a while ago, and he's really lovely, and why don't we take you to him? And I was like, this honestly seems like the least of my problems right now, but that's fine, I'll go. So I went to this appointment and he started asking me all these questions about period pain and kind of what my periods were like.
Well, I haven't even asked you. Funnily enough, all through this, you haven't mentioned periods.
Yeah, well, at that time, I was on the pill, and because I would get such bad period pain, I would do the thing where you skip the sugar pills to try and avoid having a period. So I wasn't really even having issues with heavy bleeding or getting periods.
So that masked what was really going on?
Kind of, because a common symptom of endo is to have really heavy bleeding. Some girls have bleed non-stop for 3 weeks. It's terrible. And I never had experienced that. And I think that's a very in-your-face symptom to kind of have.
Yeah.
And I have thought in hindsight that maybe if I did have really heavy, extreme bleeding, that could have
alerted
me that there was something going wrong in that way. But the pain that I was experiencing was like chronic pelvic pain without a period.
And what did this gyno say?
So when he was asking me all these questions, I think in his head he's obviously going, okay, she's got this symptom for that's like typical of endo. And I honestly thought that I was just going there to talk about this light bladder leakage. And then at the end of the appointment, he brought my mum into the room and said, I think that you've got something called endometriosis and interstitial cystitis, which is the what causes the chronic UTIs. And I was completely confused, had never heard of it, no idea what he was talking about.
Were you freaked out?
I was freaked out because the very next thing that he said because we were like, well, I was like, endometriosis, what's that? Never heard of it. He said it's a disease that, attacks the reproductive organs, and there's quite a good, for a lot of women, they will have trouble getting pregnant or staying pregnant.
Ouch.
And I get chills now thinking about how I felt in that moment, because obviously at 19, 20, I was in no way ready to have kids then, but thinking about, I always have known that I've always wanted to have a family, and then to all of a sudden be told that you might not be able to is like just the floor fell out from underneath me. And I was a total wreck for a long time, months. Every time I saw a pregnant woman, I would just burst into tears.
Because you really thought, this is going to stop me from ever falling pregnant.
Well, yeah, because that was the first thing that's like the number one thing. It's not about, endometriosis can, the pain that it causes can really affect all these areas of your life. It was fertility. That's the number one problem that women with endo face. And so that was like really what was at the forefront of my mind, that, oh my God, I've got this disease and I might never be able to have kids.
Did he say, well, here's what we're going to do to treat it, here's how we can cure it? Did you ask all those questions?
Well, it's incurable. So that was also a hard pill to swallow. And
I've never thought of endo as a disease. I've always thought of it as a condition.
Yeah.
And being told that you have a disease which could affect your fertility at age 19 must have been really scary.
Yeah, it was terrifying.
Yeah.
I think in terms of there's so much that's still not known about endo. We don't really know what causes it. And so whether it's a disease or whether it's something else, or there's just a lot of work that still needs to be done.
Did you go home and you and your mum jump on Google? Or did he offer some suggestions?
I think he actually warned us to, that if you do that, you'll probably see a lot of negative and, more frightening stuff, to maybe don't do that. I think he offered us to look at his website, which was useful but not that useful.
Because he wasn't a specialist.
Yeah. And actually what he gave me at the time was this little booklet called, I think it had endometriosis on the front cover, and these two nuzzling parrots, like a little husband and wife, like parrots, like nuzzling each other.
Very helpful.
And I was like, that's interesting choice of front cover. Anyway, flick through, let's have a look. And at the time, it's funny because I've reread this booklet and it doesn't seem that bad. Like, it's actually quite a good booklet. But at the time, every page that I turned to had mentions of fertility and I think your partner and IVF and things like that. And I was just thinking, why am I reading a booklet on IVF
when I'm 19?
This isn't helping me with the pain that I'm in. Like, I need to figure out how I'm going to make it through the end of my degree and get a job and get out of bed each day without being in pain. This is not my priority, but it sort of started to become my priority.
Because all that stuff about IVF and your partner, etc., that's about people who have endo but want to do something else, and it's a roadblock that they need to get
or
past.
They're ready to start a family, and this is something that they need help with.
But you needed help with the actual symptoms of endo.
Yeah, I needed help with improving my quality of life.
Your quality of life was that impaired by that stage?
Yeah.
So then it got worse.
Yeah, things started to get worse. I think I was booked in to have surgery which I did. And I think we were told before the surgery that we probably need to keep having it maybe every 2 to 5 years. But that afterwards I should be feeling a whole lot better.
Can you explain what endo is?
Endometriosis is when cells or tissue that is similar to the lining of the uterus is found outside of the uterus, so in like the abdominal cavity, and those cells basically aren't behaving themselves, and they can cause chronic pelvic pain and all those other symptoms that I was mentioning.
So it's like they're trying to be uterus cells and they're trying to act like cells in the uterus, but they can be anywhere. They can be in your bowel, they can be all around your intestines.
Yeah.
And the treatment is surgery?
Surgery is an absolute must. A good excision surgery is the initial way to like remove the disease. There's no other way of doing that.
And I imagine you have to be at a certain level of severity to require surgery, or it can be preemptive.
The funny thing with endo actually is if there's different stages, so stage 1, 2, 3, 4, but those stages don't necessarily correlate with the severity of the disease or how, like, for example, you could be stage 1 and be in extreme pain, or you could be stage 4 and be asymptomatic.
So what do the stages refer to then?
How widespread the disease is within your body.
And what were you?
4.
With absolute agony. So you went in for surgery. You thought it would be a fairly simple procedure. I know that at the time we heard you were going to go in for surgery.
Because I said I'm going to need like this day off and maybe the next day.
And your folks were overseas at the time, weren't they?
Yeah.
So it seemed to me like a pretty routine thing, like having cells lasered off your cervix, or in the realm of that kind of gyno
well,
day
that's kind
surgery.
of how it was like
presented
to me. Yeah, it's going to be a quick half-hour day surgery, in, out, like you should be fine. And in reality it was like a 4-hour surgery, and I didn't leave hospital for 4 or 5 days.
What did they discover when they went in? And was it through endoscopy?
It's called
through your vagina?
Laparoscopy. So it's keyhole surgery, so in through the belly button and then about 4 other places on my tummy. I was really not expecting to have endometriosis. Like when I woke up, I was expecting them to say, "Nah, you're fine. We didn't really find anything. You're free to go."
False alarm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it must be something else. Because every other medical appointment I had sort of happened. Like there was no light bulb, like, oh.
So it was like, it's not this, it's not cancer, it's not this, it's not that.
Yeah, I was always ruling out things. And I think when he said that, in one way it was like big validation that, okay, I'm not mental. All these things that I have been experiencing are legit, and they are this awful thing, this disease.
Is surgery the only way to confirm endo?
At the moment, yes.
By going in and looking at it?
It's the only way to formally diagnose it at the moment.
I see.
Which is, like, it would be really, really great if there was more money being put in to research. Some people are actually looking at trying to make a non-invasive way of diagnosing it.
I didn't realise that. So it's just suspicion otherwise. It's like we're putting these symptoms together and we think this is what it looks like.
Yeah, except that I don't think that's happening enough. Like these symptoms are really, really common, and girls are experiencing them for years and years and years, like possibly all the way through primary school and high school. And
symptoms like heavy periods.
Yep, the extreme pain, like missing days from school or work or uni for period pain isn't normal. If you're at that level of pain and then you've got all these other symptoms, that should be the thing that tells you that there's something up. Except the up thing is that so often when girls are presenting with pain and going to their doctor and saying, I'm in extreme period pain, or I'm having extreme pain outside of my period, so often told to just get on with it, or it's all in your head,
have an ultrasound,
or period pain is normal. Kind of just suck it up and get on with it.
I'm Mia Freedman, and you're listening to No Filter. So you came out of the surgery. They had to take a lot, didn't they?
I mean, the surgery was a success in that way. My surgeon felt that he had got rid of it all. It was confirmed endometriosis, and it's all been taken out. And so after I recover, I can just get on with life again. But that isn't really what happened.
What did happen?
I couldn't get my pain down while I was in the hospital. I was just in total agony, and that's why I had to stay in there, because no amount of pain relief could seem to help me. And then when I did get back home, I think my surgeon said, you give it a couple of weeks. Like, you know, don't go to the gym, like take it easy at work, you know, but in 2 weeks you'll be fine. And I had said that to you, I think. I was like, I should be sweet to come back to work in a couple of weeks and it's all good and everything went really well. And then I did go back to work and I was just getting progressively worse and I couldn't understand why. And now I understand a lot more about how chronic pain works and how pain pathways that are kind of like developed in your brain is something that you need to overcome using like cognitive behavior therapy and things like that. Like just simply having a surgery to remove the disease isn't necessarily going to help reduce your levels of pain if you've been living in chronic pain for so long.
Wow.
Yeah.
I never realised that.
Chronic pain's really interesting. And interestingly enough, when you look at how to manage chronic pain and how to treat it, regardless of the disease, like you might have had an acute injury, like you might have fallen off a horse,
injury or something, yeah,
or like a broken bone, or all different kinds of pain, and they can actually be treated in the same way because it's about what's going on in your brain and the messages that your brain is like sending to other parts of your body.
So is that a bit of a crossroads where you could have become addicted to drugs or painkillers? I imagine it would have been.
100%.
Yeah.
I
feel like I would have been.
Well, in my second surgery, which I only had 18, 20 months after the first one, I went home with a huge bag of, like a party bag of drugs.
Yeah.
Like it was enormous. I could have sold that shit for a lot of money.
Did you go through them or you decided I got to be careful?
No. I've still got things as a little reminder of what I actually was sent home with. And that was really scary. I mean, I was in agony, but I sort of left home with all these painkillers with no instructions on how often to be taking them. And I was high as a kite for days trying to administer myself my own pain relief. I know I was just on another planet. That is the dangerous thing, that the opioids and things that you are prescribed are really addictive. And, you know, if you're having a hard time as is, emotionally, physically, mentally, it's very easy, I think, to become addicted to those. And then you've just given yourself a whole other host of problems as well.
So how did you go from sufferer to warrior?
It wasn't a clear and easy road. At the time of my second surgery, that's when my mum was more like, what the hell? Like, I still don't know anything about this disease. Apart from that little parrot booklet, we had not read anything else.
Parrots.
God, love the parrots.
But weren't you online looking at things? You're both intelligent.
We were on like some Facebook groups and things like that. But I mean, when you have breast cancer, you are given this beautiful, like it's like a care package box with a special bra and all these booklets on things to do with like diet and lifestyle changes and loads of information, things that other women have written. And it's gorgeous. And like diaries tell you how to sort of track all your symptoms and things like that. With endo, there just isn't anything. Even if you are starting a new medication, like a heart medication or diabetes, asthma, you're handed things and you're kind of explained this is the road that you've got to go down. And that just doesn't happen for women with endo.
Why is that?
Well, I think that there's not enough money being put into it to create the printed materials in the first place, and then
apart from the parrots.
Yeah, apart from the parrots. And then administering them in the right places and to the right people. There's a lot of confusion surrounding the disease in general, and then if you get diagnosed with it, that kind of doesn't go away.
The turning point for you and your mum, who was really suffering and just felt helpless and is a highly experienced TV producer and documentary maker. The turning point for you two came about because of a drug that you found out about, right? A drug that could be used to treat endo that wasn't available here.
So at that point, my mum had really become like my health advocate, I guess you would say. Like I was so sick and just so depressed and so out of it. I had all these surgeries. I still wasn't well, that I was not in a position to be doing my own research and trying to find out information myself.
Yeah, listen to me going, why weren't you on the internet finding a cure?
I could barely lift a finger really.
Yeah, you were that chronically ill.
I was chronically ill in chronic pain. I just lost hope. Like, I was very unhappy and miserable. Anyway, that's when she started doing all the research kind of for me and for her as well, going, stuff this, like, we need to find out more information, and not just stuff on the internet, some other evidence-based things, and look at what's happening overseas. Like, surely there's research going on. And she found out about a World Congress on endometriosis, which is held every 3 years, I think. And it had just been held in Sao Paulo. She somehow got a hold of 400 pages of the abstracts there, read them all for weeks. We were watching her being like, what you reading? She's like, I'm finding out about
she was a tiger mother who was going to look for help for her little girl.
And in amongst all that information, that's when she read about this drug that was being used overseas to treat endo and was having actually really good results. And
what was it called?
It was called Visan, and the main ingredient of Visan is Dianogist, which is what it's sometimes called. And she was kind of like, well, if it's working really well, then why don't we have it as a treatment option here? And that's what really started our next part of our journey, which was campaigning to have Visan released in Australia.
Tell me how that campaign rolled out.
So she got on the phone to Bauer.
Of course she did. That's what she's like.
Pretty much just all she wanted to know, very simple question, why don't we have access to this drug here?
So Bauer was the drug company that manufactured it internationally, and they're a multimedia pharmaceutical company.
Yeah, but no one was getting back to her. 6 weeks went by, and she was getting very, very tired of leaving unreturned calls and messages on Bauer's answering machine. And then she pretty much just lost it at this one poor girl one day on the phone. But that did get us an appointment with the medical director, who came around for tea at our place.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I thought so.
That's like, for cynics, that was before you had a media profile, before you'd found it. Like, you were just regular people who had a question to a multi-million-dollar drug company.
And
props to them for that.
Yeah, and that was Dr. Jan Toomey, and she was very, very sweet. She was under lock and key with a lot of things, but we were able to ask her what we could, and she could answer what she could. And we pretty much said, like, if it's coming down to money or financial reasons why we don't have this here, is there a way of, like, you know, if we were to send out some emails to some of our friends and, like, possibly get them to write in and say, this is something that we would like to have, would that help? And she said, you can do that if you would like. That is something that you can do.
Did she tell you how many it would take
we didn't
to make it profitable for them, or something that they'd consider?
She said, get as many as you can in 2 weeks, because that's when we have our next marketing meeting. And whatever you've got by then, I will take it to the marketing meeting, and we'll see what happens.
How many did you think you could get?
Well, when I first walked past my mum and dad sitting at their laptop, actually sending out emails to some of their friends, being like, hey, can you please email Bauer and tell them that we really want this drug? I was like, guys, come on. Like, I think
not going to cut
this is pretty much snail mail. Like, we need to think of something that is going to reach a lot more people a lot quicker. And that's when we decided to launch a change.org petition, which we did. And I think our first target was 500 signatures. And we ended up getting 74,500.
Wow. In how long?
That was in, I think, 5 or 6 weeks.
And how did you do that?
In the first instance, I made an event on Facebook and invited my 1,000 friends to attend the event. And it had a link to the petition there.
So it wasn't actually an event. It was just go sign the petition.
Yeah, but I made it public, so it was shareable. And then, like, within like a day, there was like 2,500 people attending the event, and those people had obviously all gone and signed the petition. That's how it started, was among family and friends. And then you asked me to write an article about having endo as a way of we could also invite other women who read Mamma Mia to sign the petition. And I guess that was the first time that I was asked or had thought about, like, sharing my experience, and I was so uncomfortable with it.
Were you?
Yeah, I really struggled. I mean, I sat at my laptop at my kitchen table for hours just, like, wanting to throw it against the wall. I still didn't know how that story was going to end. Like, I didn't know where I was in that. Like, I didn't know if I was
It was a much harder thing for you to do than I probably realised. But you did it.
I did it, but I think my mum actually wrote the majority of that story. Yeah. And I think I added in like 3 sentences down the bottom.
They were good sentences. Look, the response that it received was extraordinary. And as you say, it was this silent thing that it's like a club. You don't know how big it is until you become a member.
Yeah, exactly.
And then suddenly you see that it's this massive underground club. And I suspected that it would be big and much bigger than you thought, but even I was blown away by how many people shared. And not every one of those people had endo, but they knew someone who did.
Yep. And that's because it affects 1 in 10 women at least. So everyone's going to know someone with endo. I
mean, sometimes those change.org petitions can feel a bit, you know, we're protesting against some big thing.
Big ask.
Yeah. And or it's a little bit ambiguous what it is. Exactly. But it was like, we want to tell Bauer that this drug, if it's introduced, there are women who want to buy it. Like, it was simple. It was just a commercial exchange, really.
Yeah.
And what was Bauer's reaction?
Well, honestly, we really didn't think that they were going to say yes. We took our petition, I think, to that marketing meeting, and at that point, within 2 weeks, I think we had 45,000, and we actually got the whole thing printed out because just to...
How many pages was 45,000 names?
It was a lot.
But eventually it got to 75,000.
We had 75,000, but we had 19,500 comments. So people had actually left comments on there, and that was the most powerful thing. And they were very moved by that. We were up every single night in tears reading those comments, and that was what made me... That was a turning point for me, where I was like, this isn't even about me anymore. This is so many people are going through exactly what I'm going through, or far, far worse. Girls suiciding from living in chronic pain and just not knowing what to do, not having any information, just ongoing confusion and feeling of not being believed or misunderstood, or their own family not really trusting or believing that they're in serious pain, thinking maybe they're just exaggerating it or making it up.
Or just like, harden up, it's just a period. We all get them.
Or that maybe they just need to see a psychiatrist, which girls are often told by doctors, even though they're complaining of extreme period pain.
Did it feel reassuring for you?
It felt... I was just heartbroken. It wasn't like a positive thing. It was great for us that we had all these numbers on the petition, but the comments that I was reading were just tragic. And that's when I felt, well, we both felt like a moral obligation to give those people somewhere else to go after the life of the petition was over. So we didn't know how long the petition was going to go for, but the thought of these people who for the first time are reading about endometriosis or just seeing the word in the media was like that was validation for them. So we didn't feel like we could just stop there. And so that's how come we decided to quickly come up with a name for ourselves and start a Facebook page and start migrating people across from the petition over to Endoactive's Facebook.
My name is Alyssa Warren. I'm on a mission to talk to some of the busiest women and try to figure out how the hell they do it all. Women like Zoe Foster-Blake.
5 more minutes in front of the mirror. Do it. Because when you look good, you feel good. You feel better.
Beck Judd.
I kind of think sometimes when I'm feeling a little bit out of control and I'm working really hard, I think, am I happy? Is my family happy? And if we still are, it's like, okay, this is good. It's not going to be this crazy forever.
And Janine Alice.
Mummy guilt needs to be abolished. It's ridiculous.
I don't know how she does it. It drops every Monday. Subscribe in iTunes or your favourite podcast app.
So the drug was introduced.
Yeah, so Bauer said yes within 6 weeks, which we were like shocked. Like we were just starting to get like really pumped up, like what can we do next? We'll plan a protest outside and get everyone to bring banners and signs.
And they're like, okay, stop, enough. We can
and
see.
They're like, yeah, you can have it. And we're like, wait, what?
And I think it's important for people to understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not that they were pressured into doing something. It's more that they saw a big market for it. So they were like, wow, we never knew that so many people wanted access to this particular drug. Okay, it's worth our while. We can see how our investment will pay off.
I'd like to think so, yeah. I think that's what it was.
What have you heard from women with endo when the drug became available, and do you take it?
I've been taking Visan for just over a year and a half.
And has it helped?
I was feeling better before I started taking it, but I'm assuming that it has also helped contribute to me feeling really well. So, yeah, I've been pretty much pain-free for about 18 months or so.
Wow.
20 months maybe, yeah.
There have been quite a lot of high-profile celebrities since you've come out who've supported you and the cause. Lena Dunham has written very publicly about her endo.
Yeah, Susan Sarandon. Now I'm just
Padma
mind
Lakshmi.
blanked. Yeah, Padma Lakshmi. She's been quite vocal about endo. She's started the Endometriosis Foundation of America quite some years ago.
I've heard her speak about it passionately. So she is an Indian American woman who hosts a reality Top Chef.
Yeah.
But she's quite a well-respected, I think, author. Jackie O.
I haven't heard her talk about it that much publicly. And in fact, the only time I've really ever heard it mentioned is Kyle making fun of her for having period pain.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah.
You can always guarantee Kyle to just
that's not
advance
what we need.
the conversation. And through this process, what does Endoactive do now?
So when we initially started, we weren't really sure what we were there for other than to continue this conversation about advocating for women with endo. And that's really what we've done ever since. I mean, the main problems we found was the lack of information and the confusion surrounding the disease. So we just felt that anything that we could do to talk to the experts and allow that information to funnel down to the people who really need it.
So you wanted to be a place that women could gather, receive information, talk to each other, evidence-based. That's important.
Yep.
You've made a documentary.
The video of our conference, which we held 2 years ago.
You organised that
like a documentary.
Extraordinary conference.
Yes. And we've got another one. We're planning on having another one this year as well, our second one.
Is it a full-time gig? Almost. It has been at times for you.
Yeah, at
and
times.
Of course, it earns. It's done for love, not money, because you receive no federal funding.
Correct.
Why?
That's a really good question.
Does everyone have to fight and scrabble for that kind of?
There are over 30,000 charities in Australia.
And they can't all be funded.
And there's only so much money that can go around. And I think, I'd love for endometriosis to be higher on the agenda. And I think that's what we're working towards, is actually, a lot of the awareness raising that we're doing is trying to highlight the fact that this is a public health issue and that it's affecting so many women and so many girls in Australia, and removing them from the workforce in their most, productive years when they're still young. And I think it's not understood that this is as serious as what it is.
And the effect on productivity.
Yeah.
So people will be listening and going, well, that's great. Everyone who's got endo can just take Visan now. And it's fixed.
Yeah, no, it's not going to work for everyone. Of course, everyone responds different to any treatment, and that goes for any type of disease as well. So it might work for some, it might not work for others. But there's other types of hormone like HRTs or contraceptive pills that girls take that can help with the symptoms as well outside of having surgery. And then also learning more about self-management has been a huge thing that's helped me.
What do you mean by self-management?
Pain. So self-management is really learning how to manage your disease or your illness yourself. And it has to go in conjunction with, obviously, medical management too.
What are some of the things you do?
Changing my diet has been hugely helpful. So endometriosis causes inflammation in the body. And when I was doing more research and reading on that and looking at an anti-inflammatory diet or anti-inflammatory foods, that's really, really helped me.
What are inflammatory foods?
Red meat, gluten, alcohol is inflammatory, and caffeine as well. Certain dairy products.
Stuff.
Yeah, but and
you've noticed a big difference.
A huge difference. Yeah. Yeah. Just eating a lot less sugar. That's a big one. That has really helped me a lot. I think at the time that we started Endoactive, I was unable to work. I wasn't really doing much. I was just really sick, really in pain. spending most of my time on the couch watching TV. So I really didn't have any purpose or anything getting me up and moving in the morning. And even just like starting our Facebook page and then sort of, working on Endoactive and having a goal, having a sense of purpose, totally changed my mental state. I started to just feel happier, and like I finally had something that was engaging me and that I was felt like I was helping other people, and my health started to improve like at the same time that was all going up as well. And I also started seeing a pain psychologist who was teaching me about cognitive behavior therapy, and she was teaching me a lot about anxiety. I started to experience anxiety quite badly from...
I can imagine, like the fear of the pain.
Fear of pain, and also fear of what we were talking about before, what people must think of me. And it was just consuming me. And also all these concerns about my fertility, of course, as well.
So you had your eggs frozen?
Yep, froze my eggs. I just started to become very proactive in trying to do as much as I possibly could to make myself feel better, because I was sick of just leaving my illness and my symptoms in the hands of other people. Like, I was tired of not getting the answers and the information that I needed from the specialist that I was seeing. I wanted someone to say, go home and do this.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do. Like something practical.
What was getting your eggs frozen like?
It was an experience. Overall, I found it really empowering.
You wrote about it quite beautifully on your blog, and we republished some of it on Mamma Mia because I thought it was such an interesting... You were only, 23 when you got it done?
Yeah.
Was it your idea or your doctor's idea?
It was my idea. Actually, my surgeon was not really in favour of it. He didn't really see that it was necessary, or he felt that I was a bit too young. But I was looking for anything that I could be doing to like help future me.
You mentioned recently that you were going to go again and do another round of freezing. Why is that?
Yeah, I think at the time I was told that to make it worthwhile, you should have, they don't really give you an exact number of how many you should have in the freezer, but you should have a good number in there, because pretty much every process that your eggs have to go through is another chance that they can possibly lose quality. So I got 7 perfect eggs. I was disappointed after I got them taken out that I was in total agony, and I think that's possibly to do with me having endometriosis as well, and those pain pathways I was telling you about.
Because having your eggs retrieved and frozen it's not like donating sperm.
Well,
I don't think there's a quick wank and an orgasm involved in it, is there? Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's not that quick, but I've heard that, and there's no orgasm, but I was hearing stories of women who had their retrieval and then went shopping afterwards.
I've heard it's excruciating. Did you have anaesthetic?
I had I think it's like a twilight anaesthetic, yeah.
And it's really expensive, right?
It was, well, for women with endometriosis, and this is the same if you've like had chemotherapy and your fertility is compromised, it's a medical reason that you're getting it. It's not social freezing, as they call it.
So it's subsidised.
Yeah. A certain amount, yes. If it's within, I think it's 12 months of having the surgery, having a laparoscopy.
And you speak passionately. You're flown around the world to speak at conferences now. And one of the things that you're very outspoken about is a very disturbing trend of doctors to advise women like yourself when they're 19 years old to get pregnant, and that getting pregnant will cure endometriosis, or having a hysterectomy. Will it?
Well, it is a topic that I'm passionate about, but will it cure it? Some women experience an improvement in their symptoms after they get pregnant or have a baby, and other women experience the opposite. They feel like their symptoms are worsening. Endometriosis is incurable, though really to market or try and promote anything as a cure for an incurable disease,
so surely
not
a hysterectomy would sort it out, wouldn't it? Because it just takes the uterus out. I say that with my tongue in my cheek because you've told me very forthrightly that that's not the case.
Well, with hysterectomy, again, some women do experience symptomatic relief after they have had one, but I think that it's quite an old school theory that having a hysterectomy or removing the uterus would help the symptoms. But if you think about if the endometriosis and the cells are elsewhere in the abdominal cavity, or endometriosis can even be in your diaphragm. It's even been found in people's fingertips. So removing a uterus isn't going to remove the cells that are elsewhere in the body. So that doesn't always work. I think it's very dangerous to tell a woman who's feeling vulnerable that there's a potential cure for something when it really
And telling someone
work.
to have a baby to treat a health problem is kind of problematic in its own way, isn't it?
It's difficult because one of the things with endometriosis is your fertility is compromised. So, of course, that topic needs to come up. Some women will need to have the conversation sooner rather than later. If they're only finding out that they have endo when they're in, early to mid-30s or late 30s and they're still wanting to start a family, then that is obviously a topic that's going to need to be discussed. Do I think it's appropriate to be talking about having babies with 12, 13, 14-year-olds?
Is that what happens?
We know anecdotally that does happen, yes.
It's funny, I was diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, at about the same age as you were diagnosed with endo.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit younger, actually. I might have only been 15 or 16. And the gynecologist said, oh, you better have kids sooner rather than later.
Really?
That's very hard for a teenage girl to process.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, freaked out, of course, freaked out. And, I had my mum sort of say, oh, that's rubbish. And then we went to a different gynecologist who had a very different view. But, yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I think, more broadly speaking, there seems to be a history of women's gynecological problems being told the way to solve that gynecological problem is to fill your womb with a baby.
So true.
And it's honestly been happening for a really long time. And I've become really fascinated by this topic and just looking at the similarities between health conditions from centuries ago that were treated, given the same advice as women with endometriosis are today.
Get knocked up. That'll fix it.
It's bizarre. I mean,
put a baby in there.
Yeah. So in ancient Greece, they were called, if a woman was presenting with period pain or emotional disorders or
hysteria,
or she seemed
nerves,
quite hysterical, then they said that her diagnosis was that you've got a wandering womb. They believed that the womb was a loose vessel that was free to move around the female body.
And it needed to be anchored with a baby.
With a baby and filled to stop it, to keep it there and to just keep it on lockdown. And so that you stop crying and you can return to your true calling of motherhood.
Stop bleeding. Hey, it's caused you to have a change in what you've been studying and what you're planning to do with your life vocationally, right?
Yes. So it made me want to go back and study, I guess, to upskill for Endoactive as well, but just so I could get a deeper understanding of endometriosis in an evidence-based way, doing it through the university. So I went back and did my Masters in Health Communication, and I think that's been really great because I've been able to do every single assignment for a year and a half on endometriosis and get access to all the literature, which the little nerd in me absolutely loves.
So is this going to be something you pursue as your career? What do you want to do next?
I would love to be doing Endoactive full time without being able to pay myself a wage. It's not really possible right now, but we've still obviously been working on it full time. It's not sustainable perhaps, but it's become my complete passion. And it's interesting because I was waitressing and bartending and not really knowing what I wanted to do, and then all of a sudden we've started a charity and we're holding conferences and I've gone back to uni and doing all this. It's been fantastic. So I have to say that's the silver lining, and I probably wouldn't change it actually.
So it wasn't the breaking of you, it was the making of you.
Yeah, I think so.
And you've changed the lives of so many thousands of women in Australia with endo. I love you.
Thank
and I'm
you.
so proud of you.
Love you
and
too.
Congratulations. Thanks for listening to No Filter. What a lot of fun it was to sit with my cuz in the Mamma Mia podcast studio. She speaks so eloquently. Afterwards she said, I find it so hard to describe what the pain is like and what endo feels like. And I said, I thought that's what you'd be the best at. But she said, no, I feel like I'm really, really crap at describing it. But I thought what she said was fantastic. It really helped me understand it so much more. Sylvia is curating a whole week of content about endometriosis on Mamma Mia. Not just this podcast, but we will have videos, we will have posts, there'll be information for people whose loved ones might have endo. And if you want to find out more, go to mammamia.com.au or go to the Endoactive Facebook page. She'll be linking to all the content there, and you really should join if you've got endo or want to know more about it. You can buy any book mentioned on our podcast from iBooks at apple.co/mammamia. I'm encouraging Syl to write a book. I think she should write a book about endo. I think it would be so helpful. So if there are any book publishers listening, I think that would be smart. And this is where you can also subscribe to all our other shows in one place, apple.co/mammamia. A better thing to do is to download the podcast app. You know this because I tell you every week if you're still listening, and you can get it in the App Store. My son Luca is producing this podcast, and he's sitting across from me and he's telling me to wind it up, and he's also pulling faces at me, which my usual producer Eliza does not do because she has respect. So he's saying wrap it up. If you want to suggest a guest or just ask me a question, call the pod phone on 02 8999 9386 or flick me an email at podcasts@mammamia.com.au. Today's show was produced by the very handsome Luca Levine. He wrote this script, can you tell? It's very much a family affair. Luca, Syl, me, for the Mamma Mia Women's Network. The executive producer of podcasts is Monique Bowley, who doesn't have endo, and the head of entertainment is Holly Wainwright, who also doesn't have endo, but I would bet, like most of us, they would know at least one or two women who do. So get amongst it. Lots of love. Endoactive. See you on the internets.